We've got a big new rumor regarding Warhammer 40,000, the introduction of the female Adeptus Custodes, and why Games Workshop decided to introduce a female Custodes, and Henry Cavill's reaction to the introduction of a female Adeptus Custodes. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Wrote this up over at That Park Place this evening. And this new rumor alleges that Amazon, MGM Studios, and Prime Video wanted female Space Marines for their upcoming Warhammer film or series. Again, we don't exactly know what it is, but it's being helmed by Henry Cavill. However, Games Workshop compromised by giving Amazon female Adeptus Custodes instead of female Space Marines. So this latest rumor comes in the wake of Games Workshop introducing a female Adeptus Custodes character named Custodian Kaladice Torvala Kesh in their Codex Adeptus Custodes, which I think dropped on April 27th. Not only did Games Workshop introduce the character, but the official Warhammer social media account gaslit fans, claiming, quote, there have always been female custodians, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary that goes all the way back to the Rogue Trader rules in 1987, I believe. So, in the wake of this announcement, a rumor surfaced on 4chan claiming female custodians are only going to be mentioned in the codex. No new sculpts or characters after the fact. Social media department jumped the gun and tried to put out fires with the wrong hose. Intent is to push female custodians character in Amazon show without it breaking lore, because Amazon execs wanted a woman in power armor and wouldn't settle for Sisters of Battle. People involved in the show are pissed because they've been moving ahead on Eisenhorn. Talks of inserting said female custodians into Eisenhorn's story, with Cavill threatening to walk away from the project. Small stock drop today, but Games Workshop figures it can ride it out if it stays mum on the subject. They really need better social media employees. And this is Cavill will be in an article due to, quote, heading to Games Workshop to work on the new series this week or next. The leaker concluded if he leaves, it'll be a noticeable hit to the share price, meaning the show is dead, good ending, or Amazon is calling the shots, bad ending. And then the person said, you can trust me, my dad works at Nintendo. So I was really doubtful about that rumor, given the fact that the guy says, you can trust me, my dad works at Nintendo. That almost seems like they're trying to tell us that the whole thing is fake. But I do think while this whole thing might be completely fake, I do think that Amazon could be potentially influencing the Games Workshop, given the fact that we know Amazon is super, super woke. We've gone over that in the past. They have the whole quotas. They're just as woke as the Walt Disney Company. They do all the racial quotas, the sexual identity quotas, the gender quotas, etc. It's not just for casting. It's all throughout. We've seen it play out in Wheel of Time. We've seen it play out in Rings of Power. We know how they work. We know how they operate. But a new rumor does indeed claim that Amazon was behind the introduction of the female Custodes. This comes from the Archcast, formerly Arch Warhammer, and his inside source at Amazon MGM Studios. And his source alleges that Amazon did indeed influence the introduction of a female Adeptus Custodes, and it was the result of a compromise because the streamer, that's Amazon, wanted female Space Marines, and Games Workshop said no. So you can watch the whole video from Arch. I highly recommend it. There's also like a section where it sounds like Arch is like giving his kind of opinion on all of this stuff, but then he's like, that is my scoop. That's what my source said. So it was kind of weird. It was kind of hard to kind of figure out, but I think it was like his source telling him what all of the scoop means. And then Arch kind of gives his feedback with like a brief, like 30 seconds at the end. But I suggest watching the whole video, but let's get into like the real juicy parts here. He begins this video by saying, my Amazon insider has given me some more information in regards to the female Custodes debacle and Amazon's involvement in it, which may at least in part exonerate Games Workshop. A bit later, he detailed this because he kind of recaps everything that's going on with the female Custodes. He says, according to my insider here, the attitude at the Amazon GW meetings reached downright threatening levels where the two sides were not happy with one another at all, with Games Workshop actually pushing back quite aggressively on the idea of female Space Marines, probably understanding to do so would be devastating to their company. I mean, look at the sheer scale of the crap storm that was created by female Custodes, which is not anywhere near as massive a faction as the Space Marines. Remember, we're already seeing people boycott Games Workshop over the female Custodes. They have canceled their Warhammer Plus subscriptions. Probably a significant loss in revenue if people do indeed boycott Games Workshop, stop purchasing those minis moving forward. However, Arch went continued to relay what his source told him. He says GW knowing this would be a terrible idea, pushed back a lot, but Amazon were not willing to give up on this either, and may have carried out various little tactics like threatening to bring back people on Amazon who were selling third-party goods for 40K related stuff, as they did even take down things like alternative dice sellers and people were selling bases and so on. So he speculated earlier in his video that basically GW and Amazon had come to this agreement to basically license Warhammer to Amazon, that for Amazon to get the show, that Amazon would also begin kind of regulating third-party sellers and how they're selling kind of 40K type stuff that isn't Games Workshop licensed content. He goes on and says that might have been a thing, and they might also have perhaps been talking about leaving the conversation altogether. So Amazon threatening to walk away from this Games Workshop deal. And then Arch details, eventually my insider says GW caved in part, and the female Custodes was a compromise solution intended both to ameliorate relationships with Amazon by going, okay, how about this? You'll have your female power armor, but we won't do it with the Space Marines. Okay. And also as a way to demonstrate to Amazon that this was not going to go over very well. In fact, Arch detailed that an automated Amazon system has noticed significant complaints regarding the company's various IP-related shows, such as Wheel of Time, Rings of Power, and Warhammer. Arch shared this. And indeed, Amazon's bots as well that monitor the feedback that Amazon gets has been noticing a sharp uptick in people sending in complaints about them ruining universes like the Rings of Power and mentioning the 40K TV show in specific. He actually shared an example on his screen about people sending in that stuff and like kind of the bot seeing it. So it looked legitimate. I'm not an expert on that, but it looked authentic. Now, these have not been acted upon, nor is there any indication that Amazon is particularly concerned yet, but there is now a sufficiently large enough volume of these complaints ahead of time to the point where they're scraping bots. The software looking for feedback is picking up on it and going, there's a lot of these. Should some human take a look at this maybe? Do we know what's going on here? What is causing this trend of negative feedback? Which, hey, might be a wonderful way of teaching Amazon that this might not be something they want at all, Arch suggested. So we do know, remember, that like 63% of people that watched like the first couple episodes of Rings of Power eventually did not finish the show here in the United States and in Canada. I think it was only 55% did not finish it globally. So outside the United States and Canada, 55% did not finish it after starting it. So we know that there's been significant pushback against this stuff. Wheel of Time, I think, saw declining viewership after the release of its second season. I would not be surprised once they eventually release Rings of Power, we're going to see massive decline in that show as well. So it's going to be really different from Reacher, where we saw huge gains with Reacher in season 2. But I don't know if season 3 is going to be that way, given the fact of what Alan Richardson had to say. And a lot of the people that watch Reacher might not be too happy about what he said. It's interesting. He said it after Reacher season 2 had concluded, right? And he'll probably be hoping that people don't remember that with season 3 on the way. So that is basically the portion about the Custodes and Amazon's influence over it and how all of that happened. This next part here is about Henry Cavill's reaction, and his source told him this. As for Henry Cavill, I have also heard something related to him now, namely that he is quite upset about this change. He's pissed at it, but he is not going to walk. Remember, that is what the previous rumor said. Now this rumor is saying Henry has no intention of walking, bearing in mind that we don't even know if it is possible for him to walk at this point. As his introduction, co-starring and producing in this was one of the earliest fundamental pieces of news about the Amazon Games Workshop TV show. For all we know, he could be bound hand and foot by contractual obligation and penalties at this point. Alternatively, again, it's an Amazon paycheck. I'm not entirely sure I would be willing. I think this is Arch saying this. I'm not entirely sure I would be willing to turn that down, much less somebody who is an actual actor, and this is being his job. Arch then opined, I wouldn't be surprised if he is indeed quite upset about this, because this is also his main faction, the Adeptus Custodes. That's something I learned about when I interviewed Richard Fox. That is indeed Cavill's main faction is the Adeptus Custodes. So that is basically the gist of the rumor from Arch. Like I said, there is a significant portion towards the end of his video where it sounds like it's Arch doing analysis, but then he kind of cuts that off and says that was his source doing analysis on what the source had given him and what it all means. And then Arch kind of reacts a little bit to that at the end. It was a little bit confusing because, as you can see here, throughout kind of Arch relaying this rumor, he's also injecting his opinion and his own thoughts on what his source has been relaying to him. So it's not very, it's hard to kind of tell what is the source information and what is Arch's kind of opinion on that source information. So I tried to do my best here to kind of break it down, but that is what it is. As far as my opinion, I definitely feel like Amazon probably was influencing a lot of this decisions, but I kind of agree with Arch. I didn't include his opinion here, but he also kind of thinks that he was surprised that Games Workshop was trying to push back against a lot of this stuff because he, like I believe, that the company is woke too and want to be pushing this stuff. And we've seen them kind of push this stuff. We saw that big statement they made back in 2020. Warhammer is for everyone. It made absolutely no sense, but it promised that they were going to continue to push woke ideology in the form of diversity and inclusion. So we saw that. So it's not surprising that, so it is surprising actually that Games Workshop would be pushing back against Amazon's kind of DEI juggernaut when they also have like kind of that DEI juggernaut that are funded by BlackRock and Vanguard, a lot of those giant investment firms that are pushing a lot of this stuff similar to Amazon. So I did find that a little bit surprising. But again, maybe that is because Games Workshop at the end of the day does realize that as much as they've kind of grown their property, I think through their novels, through their licensing with video games and things like that, which I think they've done significantly, their bread and butter is still selling the minis. Their profit margins on the minis are probably way higher than anything that they make off of the licensing stuff. That would be my guess. That does seem to be their main business. And I think if they did indeed do female Space Marines, that could potentially kill their business. We're already seeing significant boycotts happening because of the female Custodes. And if they did female Space Marines, which I think are, like as Arch notes in his video, they are a much larger faction for tabletop players. The Space Marines are seemingly like the main faction that you see licensed everywhere in video games for the most part. So that is kind of the face of Warhammer are the Space Marines. So that could definitely, I feel like, potentially hurt their business quite a bit if that is indeed something that Amazon was trying to do. So I could see why they might be pushing back against that. And as we've seen, there's already been this big pushback with the female Custodes. So those are a little bit of my thoughts. But let me know what you guys make of this rumor. Let me know in the comments below. Are you kind of surprised by this rumor? Is there anything that stands out to you? Do you agree with me? Is there something else that you see? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable to each other, but to always speak the truth.